Hey, what's going on, MBG? You already know what it is. It's your boy Antoine Johnson, a confidential informant. If you don't know me, you should get to know me. I'm available on all social media sites at _blessed That's Instagram and Facebook. You also catch me on Facebook, primarily underneath the name of Twan Johnson. That's TWAN Johnson. But no further ado, guys. You know it's 2018. I'm really about positive energy right now. You know, if you ain't got nothing good to say, man, direct your energy somewhere else, man, because that negative energy, it pulls you down. So anybody rubbing off that negative energy, definitely find a way to get that off you. That's my little message I wanted to get to y'all before we get into, pretty much, MBG's been going over mental health awareness this month because they're nationally known. That's January. A lot of people have been disregarding that this month starting off their year. I know we made a lot of goals, man, but also make sure we still care about one another, man. If we know that somebody has a disorder, let's not make fun of them. We're in the age that everything has to go viral. And, it's kind of annoying that, we'll take certain situations and, make fun of it when really it could be a bigger issue going on and somebody might be taking advantage of, somebody's disability, to put money in their pocket. And pretty much the topic I want to really go into today, with that being said, is Munchausen syndrome. Excuse me if I'm saying it wrong. It's a bunch of different pronunciations online, but pretty much Munchausen syndrome, according to WebMD, is a fictitious disorder, a mental disorder in which a person repeatedly and deliberately attacks as if he or she has a physical or mental illness when he or she is not really sick. So there's people that will come up with a bunch of things, if they have an outbreak on their hand, if they get a little dry, they think they might have eczema, then boom, then they're going to the doctor and they're getting all these type of recommendations and they're coming back home and the doctor can say they don't have anything, but then the next week is something else. Now, we've all dealt with people like this, and let's be real, sometimes people we always felt that it was that one person that really didn't have as many problems as what they're saying, and that's pretty much the basis of what Munchausen syndrome is. Me personally, I'm very big on knowing like the origin of stuff, like why Munchausen. What's up with that word? I don't know where that came from. So did a little research. Munchausen actually came from Baron von Munchausen, and with him, he was a general. Some sites say he was fictional. But when I checked on Britannica.com, when I checked his biography, I didn't see anything about him being a fictitious character. However, it is a movie that you can watch if you want to dive into this man's head a little bit more. But pretty much as it reads on Britannica.com, he was an 18th century German general known for telling his stories as a soldier, hunter, and sportsman. And most would say he exaggerated most of his stories. So did a little more background study on him. He retired as a general. And once he retired as a general, he pretty much went around telling his stories of it when he was a general. Now, there's nobody that can really, claim these stories to be true unless you were in the field with him. And a lot of people said that his stories were a little fabricated. And just being in the world that we are in now, on top of the fabrication, one thing I do want to touch on as well, especially in black homes, just to bring that perspective to anybody that might not know. So in the black homes, we like to push a lot of them problems to the side. So let's say somebody says, mentally, I'm not okay. I'm not happy in a black home. For me, majority of the people, they try to urge you to combat that more than to help you deal with it. They more so want you to kind of push it to the side, because at the end of the day, as a black person, when you're a parent, you already know your child already has a disadvantage. And there's nothing wrong with being black. I love being black. However, we also want to make sure our child is prepared for the world. So when it comes to situations like that, when a child, comes home for being bullying, or he just got in a fight, or somebody just might have said something hurtful, they might not feel like they're getting the love they're getting. Typically in a black home, they're going to ask you to suppress those feelings so you don't show a weakness going forward in life. And I don't necessarily agree with that, man. I feel like we're at a point right now where I can't say that we're on the verge of equality. I can't say that we are on the verge of making enough noise where we're going to get a change, where something's going to happen. So I think that we're at the point now where we need to kind of lower our guard as black people and learn how to explain ourselves and how to communicate with each other better. But don't want to go too much into that. Back to Munchausen syndrome. Pretty much this is people that are saying that they're going through something, but they're really not going through these issues. These are a couple of the symptoms that were listed. I saw this on myclevelandclinic.org. I always try to cite the work. You know, they taught us that in school. I don't agree with a lot of things they taught us in school, but as you start to go through these articles, man, you'll start to see a lot of stuff that is just blatantly wrong. And people don't catch that, so you got to really be careful when you listen to sources and make sure they're credible. So that's why I always make sure I get a site to make sure y'all know, like, okay, does he know what he's talking about? One of the symptoms that they said, of course, obviously dramatic, but no medical history. That's the type of person that, you know, keep wanting to go back to the doctor because they think something's wrong with them, but it's really nothing going on. When every time they make a trip, there's no medical history. They're saying basically you're fine. Now, let's pause for a moment. As we know, sometimes the doctor is not right. We've all been in school. This is my personal stance. We've all been in school, and sometimes, you know, you got to go above and beyond to, you know, pass these classes. So I'm saying this. It's hard to tell me that a doctor has to be in school another additional 10 to 15 years on top of the basis 4-year school. That is draining. So it's very hard for me to believe that a doctor, when you go to a hospital, unless you're like bleeding to death, I really don't see the purpose of really going to hospitals about, you know, these type of issues like headaches, you know, anything like that. Now, if you just feel absolutely terrible, you never been through anything like that, then yeah, absolutely go. Overall, though, you know, the hospital's really not gonna give you an answer. You should get a primary care doctor. That way you can kind of get some definite answers, because he keeps track of those trends. He actually can follow up with you better than what they would do in the hospital and save that money on that bill. You know, primary care doctors are expensive still. However, they're a lot easier to diagnose you properly. So if you are one of those people that are dramatic with no medical history, I advise that. Another symptom was problem with identity and self-esteem. I see this a lot, and I'm not saying people have Munchausen syndrome. I won't recommend, you know, people labeling people to have Munchausen syndrome unless they've been actually diagnosed. However, having problems with identity and self-esteem, I think everybody goes through that. So it's kind of hard to box somebody in with that. Me, myself, I was going through a point. I was very overweight at one point in time. And I had very, very, very low self-esteem. Hard to identify with people. You pretty much, when you're at that point, for me personally, my self-esteem was so low that I really had to identify with others, and I kind of added to my identity trying to relate with others. And sometimes that might even lead to me agreeing with things I didn't want to agree with, but it was for the greater good to make sure my social life was somewhat active. I'm not saying that with praise. I'm saying that to say that I'm aware of that flaw I was doing. I was trying to identify with others to identify me, when you really have to go on a self-evaluation journey to find yourself. And once you get there, you realize a lot of the stuff that you were paying attention to doesn't even really matter. And then you'll notice that your self-esteem will start to go up, because you know you, and you know that you don't need a lot. New symptoms show after negative tests. Pretty much, as I said, with the no medical history, if there's no symptoms being shown after you, get tested by a doctor, if you think that you might have a sexual transmitted disease, and then the doctor is telling you, you don't have anything, and then you said, well, hey, I feel like an itch, or I see another bump popping up here, this, that, or the third, just giving examples, and the doctor keeps telling you, is nothing there. That's a mental thing. That's can fall into this Munchausen symptoms as well. Last two things, just in closing. We got history of seeking other treatments, even if you have to travel. Also, and then predictable relapse after improvements. Pretty much people around you can almost predict when you're going to go right back to, after the doctor says you're okay, they can almost time it like 2 weeks later from now, we know that she's going to be out again because she's going to say this, that, and the third. I think we see that more so in the workplace. Of course, you have that person that's always sick, ill, can't come out. That's always happening. In closing, I just want to go over a couple more things on this Munchausen syndrome. What causes Munchausen syndrome is the statistics, abuse and neglect, history of illness leading to hospital visits, and triggers from other personality disorders. As far as the statistics, didn't really see much statistics on the topic. If you guys do have some statistics, definitely go write it on the MBG Facebook page and let us know your thoughts. But that's pretty much all I have, guys. You know, that's Munchausen syndrome. Definitely, if you heard anything that, you know, could relate to you, definitely be proactive and go get it checked out. Don't fall into the Munchausen syndrome and just keep thinking something's wrong with you after you get diagnosed. If you feel like something's getting worse with you, definitely find a primary care doctor so you can get yourself checked out to make sure that you might not be a victim of Munchausen syndrome. And just to let you guys know, we're about to go on a quick break, but after that break, you know, our leader, Lily Mae, I thank her a lot for putting me down on this journey. A lot of people don't know I graduated from Virginia State University as well as her, and I graduated a degree in health science, so this is definitely in my field. I appreciate her sliding me in here. It's a nice to get a breath of fresh air from, you know, my music for a moment, and definitely dive into something that could actually help my community. So I'm really big on that. But Lily Mae is going to talk to us about the 45 personality disorder, and narcissistic personality disorder. Excuse me, y'all. But I appreciate y'all being with me today. This is Antoine Johnson, the confidential informant. If you don't know me, you should get to know me. You can follow me on Facebook at Twan Johnson and @_Blessed Loves for everything you need. All my projects is up on iTunes, SoundCloud, everything of the above. You guys enjoy the rest of y'all day. Lily Mae gonna be with y'all after the break.
For decades, it's been a taboo subject, and in some communities, it still is. If you're a black man in Britain, you're 17 times more likely to be diagnosed with a serious mental health condition than if you're white. It's a startling statistic, and it led blogger and DJ Keith Dubay to make a film for the BBC to investigate why.
I was diagnosed with depression a few years ago. It was the hollow feeling of worthlessness a lot of the time. It was a horrible experience. It was very confusing because black people don't really do mental illness, so it's not something you grow up hearing a lot about. I think my lowest point was when I was continually waking up thinking, I don't want to live anymore.
For over 2 years, I didn't utter a single word about my depression to anyone. I was too ashamed. But then I decided to out myself.
I wrote a blog, closed my laptop, and I went to sleep. So I've woken up a couple of hours later, and yeah, I had a crazy amount of messages from people. All of the messages were positive. And I also did realize that there were a lot of people just like me that were going through the exact same things I was.
One message in particular has caught my eye. It's from a 20-year-old uni student from Surrey called Simone.
So when did you first kind of feel like something wasn't right?
I think one time in year 10, there was a week where I just started having breakdowns. I remember there was one time when I just started crying randomly during break time. I realised there was something wrong.
So at any point, did you speak to your parents about?
I felt like if I was to tell my parents, they would just kind of brush over it and not kind of find out the root of the problem.
Do you feel like there's a stigma surrounding mental health, you know?
With parents, especially African parents, they don't have enough knowledge about it, especially the ones that were born and raised in Africa, like my parents were born and raised in Congo. I think I'm ready to see a doctor and finally get all, like, checked out.
To find out just how it feels to be sectioned, I'm meeting Kameta. She's been in and out of hospital since 2010 and suffers from bipolar disorder.
After I gave birth, it was quite a difficult birth. I then went to a GP, and then when I was at the GP, apparently no one from the early intervention team was available. So they called the police. So 5 policemen came into the GP and held me down, physically held me down to the floor, because no woman in their right mind is going to give up their 6-month-old.
Wow, so how did that make you feel at the time?
Words cannot describe the pain.
So what can we do about this? We can start talking about it more, Not going to solve the problems with the system overnight, but if we do talk about these things, that's the beginning.
Well, let's talk about this now with Malcolm Phillips, who manages a unit in West London that specialises in treating black people with mental health issues. Thank you very much for coming in to see us. You've spoken to Keith as part of that film, and something he said there really stood out. He said, black people don't really do mental illness. What do you make of that?
In all communities, there's a stigma about talking about mental illness, and I think that's partly what Keith is alluding to, as well as he may be alluding to the fact that the community are very reticent to engage with mental health services at all, which is one of the major issues that we're dealing with.
And in that film, we also saw the shocking account of Kameta being sectioned. And we know that figures tell us that black men are 6 times more likely to be sectioned. You have 25 years in the profession. Do you feel they're being treated fairly?
That's very difficult.
Or differently?
They're certainly being treated differently. There's no controversy about that. We're aware that the much higher rates of sectioning, much higher rates of restraint.
Why do you think that is?
As I said, there's a great deal of stigma, but also within the communities there's a great deal of fear of mental health services. These figures are not unknown to the community, and so people hide away from services. People don't want to engage. People are also concerned that they may not be understood. Communities, African and Caribbean communities' understanding of mental illness may be very different from a European understanding. And so when they do get into touch with services, it's often under compulsion, and they're often much more unwell.
We heard Keith again, in that report saying, we've got to start talking about it more, and that includes the family. You've just said how difficult that is. But we know that 65% of black people with mental health issues feel treated unfairly by their family. Do you think that is the key to changing and helping move things forward?
I think a great deal of work has to be done in working with families, with communities, to better understand mental health as it's understood in this country, as services are provided, but also to be able to share with each other their own views and understandings of mental illness. People's concerns about mental illness often leads to people being isolated and separated from family, which only makes issues worse.
So you're saying it starts with the families and communities themselves?
Yes.
Malcolm Phillips, many thanks for your time. Thank you.
No problem.
And you can see the full documentary, Being Black, Going Crazy, which is available to watch on the BBC iPlayer now.
Hey, what's up, everybody? It's your girl, Lily Mae, and we're back with Sipping Tea with MBG. Wow, I can't believe it's the last Saturday in January. I mean, oh, man. It has been a very, very, very interesting month. And I know that talking about, Manchausen syndrome, talking about antisocial personality disorder, all the personality disorders that we discussed, but today it's crazy because we're going to be talking about so much, and we've talked about so much, and my contribution to this episode is going to be on narcissistic personality disorder. And like I told you guys last week, the reason that I chose the disorders that I chose to bring you information on was simply because our president and these United States of America in my opinion, is mentally ill. And the interesting thing is that he's mentally ill, but nobody really wants to address it. Nobody wants to talk about the signs and symptoms that he's presenting that's really indicative of not only mental illness, like personality disorder-wise, but he also displays signs of individuals who are going into Alzheimer's with the things that he's doing. And so I don't want to talk too much about him because I want to talk to you about narcissism. As always, let's make sure that we go back and redefine and reoperationalize what a personality disorder is. A personality disorder is definitely a long-standing, now listen, long-standing, pervasive, dysfunctional, inflexible pattern of behavior. And it's an inner experience that pretty much deviates from cultural expectations. Now, the interesting thing about that is that when we talk about cultural expectations, it kind of gets sticky, okay? It kind of gets sticky because cultural expectations are defined by what? Individuals in society. So we got to be, really, really, I say this, I take that definition with a grain of salt. But let me jump into narcissism because that's a personality disorder that I definitely want to talk to you about. First and foremost, let me throw out there a few of the characteristics associated with narcissism, because a lot of times we talk about, oh, you bipolar, you this, you that, and it could be any of the other personality disorders that we talked about. So narcissism is another one of those cluster B personality disorders, those odd, dramatic, erratic personality disorders. And a narcissist has an exaggerated sense of self-importance, which ends up leading to a sense of entitlement, a lack of empathy, and a need for attention. Now, being confident and being cocky is not necessarily narcissism. Narcissism comes in, once again, when it's long-standing, when it's a pattern, but also that lack of empathy is really, really large. And I hate to keep, well, no, I don't. I mean to keep using him, because when I compare Donald Trump to a narcissist, it just continues to overplay. And the other thing is, to validate what my claim and substantiate what I'm saying, narcissism, research has shown, is more common among men than women. Now, this is the interesting thing about a narcissist. A narcissist has fragile self-esteem. A narcissist has fragile self-esteem. Okay? So when we talk about narcissism, we want to define narcissism as it relates to impairments in identity and self-direction, and impairments in empathy and intimacy. Now, that piece that I just talked to you about as it relates to that fragile self-esteem and that underlying grandiosity, that grandiosity is that entitlement piece. It's that entitlement piece. It's that piece of them that says, you owe me this, that attention-seeking, because the grandiosity and that entitlement causes you to be attention-seeking. But once again, all of these impairments are consistent over time and they remain stable. Once again, defined by your president. So overall, the overarching theme with a narcissist is that their self-worth is overvalued, and more than likely they didn't receive negative consequences as a child. Now, let me make sure I define that grandiosity to you, because I want to make sure that when we're using terms that may not be, terms that are used in everyday vocabulary, grandiose self-presentation is like a way for people with this disorder to convince themselves that they are self-sufficient and don't need anybody's support, okay? So basically, when you're grandiose, you're impressive in your appearance and style, okay? You do that so that it takes away from what really may be going on with you. Now, the other interesting thing about this is that research has found an increased risk for developing narcissistic personality disorder among abused children and those who lost parents through adoption, divorce, or death. And so we need to really, be mindful of these things. So just to give you a little bit more information, one of the things that I think is important that we kind of talk about is the fact that narcissism is linked with early failure to learn empathy as a child. Now, this is an argument that seems to always come up because people don't know the difference between empathy and sympathy. Guys, empathy is your ability to understand how somebody is feeling. So I've lost my dad, but I never lost a child. So I can empathize feelings of grief and loss with a friend who lost a child, but I can't sympathize, so to speak, okay? Because with empathy, I can say, okay, I understand how you're feeling, but I don't know exactly how you're feeling because I never lost a child. And we express sympathy all the time. Sometimes it might not be real, but we express sympathy. But understanding empathy means you understand the way a person, you try to understand the way somebody feels, even though you may have never been through that specific situation. But listen to these characteristics of a narcissist. So the interesting thing is that when we talk about a narcissist, one of the major characteristics is that a narcissist is preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, and brilliance. Let me sip my tea. Because that's your man. That's what he do. Okay? So things like, I make America great again. Because, see, narcissists are like so obsessed. They're so obsessed with brilliance and beauty that they just can't get it together in their head. You know what I'm saying? Now, what you need to know is that in order for a person to be classified or deemed a narcissist, 5 or more of the characteristics that I'm naming off have to be assessed. That grandiose sense of self-importance that we talked about, that marked presence, that, beautiful appearance, belief that he or she is special. So belief that the individual can only be understood or should only associate with people of special or high status. Okay? That lack of empathy. They're unwilling to recognize the needs and feelings of other people. They need excessive admiration. Think about it. When you're looking at a person and you know that they just as quacky and kooky as they can be, but they always need reassurance. They always need admiration. They need everybody to love them. Individuals with narcissism are often envious of others, or they believe that others are envious of them. Okay? So that's that they're interpersonally exploitative. Like they show arrogance. They got hardy behaviors and attitudes, that whole sense of entitlement, that whole me. It's all about me. Forget about you. I know some of y'all remember Maya out there. But that's just a little bit, about narcissism. Now, this is the thing. I always, when talking to you guys about these personality disorders, one of the biggest things that I like to do is I like to consult the DSM-4 and 5. And just so you understand, the DSM is a manual. And it's a manual that's used to tell us and to help our practitioners diagnose disorders and things of that nature. And the DSM stands for Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And there is a 4 and there's a 5. And generally I consult both because I know in practice we use, when I first started out, we were using the 4, and now we use the 5. So what I want to do is I want to kind of just talk a little bit about narcissism and like how it appears. because sometimes narcissism appears, you know, with other disorders. And I think that's something that we really have to discuss, because you might just be thinking that your child feeling themselves, and you may have a narcissistic child. And it's okay. It's okay. But what we have to do is we have to get help for these kids. And we have to get help for our family members, because the other thing is this. If you have a narcissistic child, you might be a narcissist. Your spouse or that baby's father or whatever might be a narcissist, or mother, you know. So these are the types of things that we need to get a hold on, and that's why it's so important, guys. It is so important that we talk to our kids, we talk to our family, and find out what mental health disorders are in our family, okay? It's important that we talk about these things. You know, I know in the African-American community, we have this stigma about mental health disorder. I need you to understand something. Mental health disorders, personality disorders, all this stuff can be caused by genetics, environmental and social factors. There are theories. There are so many theories, but genetics are huge. Genetics are huge. And let me tell you this. Narcissistic personality disorder has a composition of approximately 75% of males, people. 75% of males. So I'm just saying, you need to be careful. Ladies, when you're dating, you really need to be careful. You really need to be careful. Now, the interesting thing about narcissism is that studies show that it develops in early adulthood, and like the last study that I reviewed was like in 2013. And you know things change. So it's been, 4 or 5 years. It could be now developing in late adolescence. So we need to make sure that we are really staying on top of these things and paying careful attention to what's going on. Once again, guys, this is Sippin' Tea with MBG, Brain Buster 101, and I'm talking to you about narcissistic personality disorder, and I'm comparing it to your 45th president of these United States, because, once again, individuals with narcissism have an inflated sense of self-importance. They not only believe that they're superior to others, but they demand others acknowledge their uniqueness. So, hence, no one has ever done great things like I've done. I'm going to make America great again, those type things. And the biggest thing is that empathy. They lack that empathy, and they're not sensitive to the needs or emotions of others. So, guys, this is what I'm saying. I'm not going to keep going off on the tangent about Donald Trump. You know pretty much how we feel about him over here, Sippin' Tea with MBG. But at the end of the day, what I want you to understand is this. Personality disorders, mental health disorders, all of those disorders, it is very, very significant. There are biological treatments, which is medication. There are psychosocial treatments. Dialectical behavior therapy, okay, it's new. Now, let me tell you about that. Dialectical behavior therapy is new. It's a combination of individual and group therapy, and you have some phone coaching. But basically what it is, it works towards decreasing behavior. The primary goal is to, increase behavior that regulates your emotions and increase your tolerance of, distress. But it works on decreasing any of those behaviors that interfere with therapy. And so we just got to make sure that when we're dealing with these individuals with personality disorders, that we are being very, very intentional, but also being mindful and showing empathy to those individuals. Because at the end of the day, you don't know what people are going through. You really don't know what people are going through. Just know that there's very little evidence that treatment is effective for individuals with narcissism, okay? The treatment generally does focus, like I said, on regulating those emotions, that lack of empathy and sensitivity to criticism. Now, the interesting thing is that narcissists are generally depressive. So narcissism co-occurs with depression, so you might want to look out for that. Parents, be careful with over-evaluating your kids, okay? And when I say that, be careful with over-evaluating your kids unrealistically. Social learning theory is major, and your kids learn from watching you. So please, please, please make sure that you're careful with that. And the biggest thing is this. My final thoughts for narcissism are this. Causes are hard to pinpoint. and treatment is difficult to adequately prescribe and implement. And what that simply means is this. We can blame mamas, daddies, grandmas, uncles, the streets, the media for these different disorders, but the reality is this. Anybody that has any type of disease needs treatment, and the same is true for personality disorders. So, this is just pretty much what I wanted to bring you about narcissism. And just know there are going to be a lot of different personality disorders that develop over the next course of years, because this DSM is always changing. But what I want you to do is, when you get an opportunity, go check out the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Health Disorders and just read through and familiarize yourself, because, with Sipping Tea with MBG, we can bring you the information and education, but we really want you to educate yourselves. So once again, guys, it's Lily Mae. You're listening to Sipping Tea with MBG on this beautiful Saturday afternoon, and we'll be back with you in a jiffy.
I'm from a really small town, born and raised, still live here, plan to live here for a really long time. I love it. You know everybody in town, so it's a really familial feeling. I feel like this is it's like I can almost breathe here. I was a really big tomboy. So I liked, playing outside. I had a really big imagination, so I would just go out and play and pretend I was an astronaut, a policeman. Barbies, I would just be in there for hours just playing. I started getting bullied in 3rd, 4th grade. And it was really a feeling of desperation, because you just don't understand why people are picking on you, especially having grown up with that group of kids. As a Latina, obviously your hair is darker and thicker, and so they'd call me unibrow and monkey and ugly, and even to this day, when I'm getting ready and stuff, all those thoughts, sometimes those words that they called me still pop in my head, and I just have to be no, that was their perception, but you still almost carry it a little bit with you. At first, it's a rush. You're just haha, I cannot eat. And it's a way to, it's the only thing I had control of in my life. So it's a lot about self-control, and then a lot about you're just so hopeless, you just want to disappear in the end. One day I came home from school, and my mom was cooking dinner, and I was doing my homework. And she offered me some chips and salsa or something like that. And I remember a huge fight broke out because I didn't want to eat. And then at that point, my mom was like, "Are you eating? Do you have an eating disorder?" And at that point, I was like, "What? No, I don't." But what happened was, once she found out, that's when I started self-harming, because I felt like part of me is exposed. Now I need to do something else. I remember that night I went and I cut myself for the first time, and it was such a relieving feeling. Cutting and feeling the pain and seeing the blood and all of that just gave me, it was desperate. It's hard to explain. I felt really desperate in the situation. And at that point I knew this is a problem. It's out of control. People don't do this. But through everything, it's the one thing that was the hardest for me to get over. Because no matter what, if they put me in a treatment facility, they put me in a hospital, I still knew I had the cutting. And that gave me comfort. It really did give me peace.
One of the main ways that being in a rural area can impact a person getting treatment is simply lack of services that are available in rural communities. Oftentimes, there aren't buses available, and if people have unreliable transportation or they don't have money for gas, that's going to impact their ability to come in for treatment.
And what ends up happening is that children and families, if they can access a therapist, if they can access a psychiatrist, they're pretty lucky. And then if they need more than that, they have to go through many hoops, searching and seeking out resources for these children so that they can get them. Children may sit in the emergency rooms for days, sometimes weeks, waiting for an inpatient bed to be available. And that inpatient bed may not even be in the same county that the family members are in.
When I was 18 was when I think, for me, the worst of everything happened. That is when I attempted suicide for the first time. I attempted suicide, I think, 6 more times within 7-8 months. It was basically me and my psychiatrist. It was a new psychiatrist. And I remember I told her, you send me to the hospital or you send me to treatment, but if you send me home, I'm gonna die. I mean, that's about $2,300 a day to stay in a facility like that. Honestly, I'm still paying off medical debt from that time. It's basically 24-hour programming and monitoring. So you're doing groups and therapy all day. I had never had that in-depth therapy before. And that's when I started to really understand what was going on with me and maybe some of the reasons why I have been through what I've been through.
So children and families who are having trouble accessing care is somewhat two-pronged. On one side is the family and the children that are poor. They can't get access to services. Once they get those services, they're few and far between for having a full service array of what they need. And they're often last on the list because they only have Medicaid. The other side, the flip side, are the families who aren't very wealthy, people who have basic insurance but are maybe barely making ends meet. They're the ones who also have a gap to get services. And part of the problem is many of the services that have been set up for the Medicaid population are not accessible to them.
You'd like to think, oh, I'm just going to get the help, but there's a lot that goes into it, and unfortunately finances is a big part of it. And I can only imagine for people who don't have any resources at all. I mean, it's probably impossible. I feel that there's a lot for me to do here. That's one of the reasons I came back to work with the Latino population, the rural population, and mental health. Because we don't have the resources here, I really feel that I can make an impact and that we need to make an impact in this community. The work that I put into my recovery is a daily thing. There's some days still that if something happens that triggers me, sometimes I don't get out of bed, but I have more good days than bad days now, a lot more good days than bad days. Definitely, it's the first time where I feel stable enough to consider what do you want to do for the rest of your life. You're worthy to get better. We have a community of people in recovery, a community of people who are still in their diseases, and whichever chapter you're in, that's okay. but it can get better, and it will get better.
Hey guys, welcome back to Sipping Tea with MBG. Of course, this is Amber J in the building, coming to you to wrap things up for our January Mental Health Month. Again, MBG just decided to bring this awareness to everyone because mental health is, like I always say, is a silent killer because it's one of those things that's not recorded whatsoever. Not recorded, excuse me, but not talked about whatsoever. It's again, putting that uncle or that person in the back room in the corner and shutting the door and not addressing it. And again, it's a continual process. It's an uncomfortable topic, but we still need to talk about it and address it. And I just want to let you know before I go into my little spiel, what we got coming up for February. February for us is going to be, visiting old friends and dropping some knowledge here and there. And what that means is MG is going to take a look back at 2017, 2016, and just look at all of our shows with the podcast, all of our TV shows. And for those that are not located in Richmond, VA, we have been on TV. So we thought about it. We're like, you know what? We've covered various number of topics. Some people have seen us, some people haven't, and we might as well just bring it to the podcast and give it to you raw in a different perspective, as always, as what we do, because, again, it's 4 people, 4 different brains, 4 people, different thought process. So we're going to be visiting old friends and old topics and also dropping some knowledge because it is Black History Month, as well as various different health awarenesses like American Heart, Children's Dental Health, National Heart, eating disorders, everything. So we're just going to drop, health tips here and there, knowledge here and there. So, again, that's what we do. We're here to inform, educate, motivate, and inspire for you to be agents of change. And for those in Virginia, just to let you know that General Assembly is in session. So if you don't know what's going on, of course, go to the General Assembly website and see what's getting ready to be voted on. See what the Budget Committee is looking at as far as funds to allocate. Are we going to get paid more? What's your representative, what's your delegate is trying to push through? Is it benefiting you in your area? Is it not? Again, hold these people accountable. These delegates, these representatives on the local level are aspiring to be your next senator, your next House of Representatives, possibly your next president, vice president, so forth and so forth. So just keep that in mind when it comes to politics and things of that nature. So we're going to get right into it. So, of course, with me, I always got to come with the raws of the raw. So I'm going to talk about antisocial and dependent this time. And I know everybody's so quick to say antisocial. What's antisocial? I know people that are antisocial, but do you really know people that are antisocial? Antisocial is a totally different beast, a whole different beast. I like to say that. It's one thing, we've talked about borderline, we've talked about histrionic, how it affects men more than women. And when it comes to histrionic, it just came to my mind, histrionic can be compared to dependent personality. And being a histrionic, for men, they over-exaggerate. Dependent, they over-exaggerate to the point of showing dependency or just leaning on that person, and they feel like they can't fend for themselves. But we're going to get into that. And for those that have been listening and checking in, we greatly appreciate it. We're here because of you all. And if you've been listening, the compare and contrast, and you put your input, and always, give us input. Of course, you go to MBG on Facebook, Instagram, and let us know what you think. And also, if you got topics, drop them in the comments as well. Well, like I said, we're going to get into this antisocial personality disorder. So antisocial personality, when you think of anti, you think, okay, anti, you don't want to be social, right? Well, according to Psychology Today and statistics, of course, again, MBG always researches before they put out information, so we just not giving you stuff off the dome. Antisocial personality disorder is defined as a pervasive pattern of disregard for and violation of the rights of others that begins in childhood or early adolescence and continues into adulthood. They may disregard social norms and law, repeatedly lie, place others at risk for their own benefit, and demonstrate a profound lack of remorse. I know we all know somebody like that, right? And it's interesting. We all heard of sociopath or
Yeah, sociopath, pretty much. But it's interesting when researching this, anti-personality disorder is also known as sociopathic personality disorder, because usually sociopaths don't have any remorse, don't show any empathy, very charming, just like an antisocial, very charming, can win over somebody, but when it comes to calculated moves or any crimes in regards to like murder, different stuff like that, there's no remorse, no nothing. It's a lack of everything. It's about them. It's about self. Similar to narcissistic, but on an extreme end, so to speak. Let's see here. As far as antisocial, I know a lot of people that's antisocial or give off the antisocial. So we all have that friend in our crew that is they don't give a fuck person. And what I mean by that is they really don't care. So you have that one person in that crew that they'll ride for you, they'll come off, they'll ride for you, all of that stuff, and they just don't care. They'll shoot up something. They'll they shoot something up. They'll go in on somebody. They'll scream on somebody. They just I don't care. But their loyalty is to you, so they have some type of caring for you. But as far as anybody else, they don't have that. They don't have no remorse. They don't have no empathy. They don't care. That's a little bit on the lines of antisocial. Or you have that friend that's willing to find out some stuff, and they'll say, hey, you say, hey, hey, best friend, hey, friend, can you, set up a fake profile and kind of can you see what this dude doing for me? They might charm their way in. Again, another form of antisocial, but not necessarily saying that person is antisocial. It's just giving you an examples. But, again, just looking up this stuff as far as antisocial, again, the definition is very interesting to me because, how it says early childhood and early adolescence going into adulthood, which means to me or tells me that it's a learned behavior and it just grows. So if somebody or a parent or somebody shows that, does that in front of their child, we always say, do as I say, not as I do. Will children actually do as you do? They copy. So that normally happens, and it just grows and grows and grows. So obviously there's some underdevelopment there, and so once the antisocial personality disorder grows and grows into adulthood, it's all about them. It's all about me, how I feel, and sometimes it can be distorted. Sometimes it's a form of selfishness, but not to the extreme. So it just depends on the person. And again, personality disorders, there's no medication for these things. It's a behavior that's learned, and it's just taken over. So now you have to kind of put boundaries and reverse that. So going into dependent personality disorder. Dependent personality disorder, like I said, is similar to histrionic in a comparison of histrionic is for men. Dependent is for women. What it is over-dependent, over-relying on others to meet one's emotional and physical needs. They don't trust their own abilities to make decisions, and they feel that others have better ideas, which that's not usually the case. But when you are insecure in you tend to rely on others. This usually appears in early adulthood, and it affects more women than men. Dependent, especially if you watch the show like Snapped or Deadly Women, you find a lot of women are dependent on their, or codependent, as they say, on their significant other or their boyfriend or girlfriend, whoever. And then when they realize that that person is leaving them on to defend themselves to be independent, they don't know what to do, so they lose it. So again, dependent personality disorder. Again, all these personality disorders that we've talked about, a lot of them are going unmisdiagnosed because, again, of that fear of the doctor. And a lot of people just don't like doctors, and a lot of people don't want to realize I have a problem, so to speak. So antisocial independent, very two interesting disorders, and what can we do about that? Antisocial, again, is like a lack of remorse. They don't care. So if you see flags of a person that does not care, no matter what you do, repeatedly lies. We know a bunch of liars. We know a bunch of liars. But repeatedly lies, it's up to you to make that decision to leave that person alone. You have to set boundaries. Again, antisocial personality disorder is a boundary. You got to set boundaries, just like borderline. You got to set those boundaries, what you can and cannot do, what you can and cannot say when it comes to me. Those are the boundaries. Dependent is the same thing. Only difference in dependent is you have to kind of help that person establish on their own and let them know that it's okay, little by little. They can't take a lot. Because if they're relying on other people for their emotional and physical needs, one, hey, I'm gone, and they're devastated. So it's little by little. You have to coach them and help them along. Again, this is Sipping Tea with MBG. Amber J, dropping the knowledge on the antisocial and dependent personality disorder. And, of course, again, we greatly appreciate everyone tuning in to our January segment of mental health. And, again, this is a serious topic. Even though, we do humor, we laugh, joke, cut up, but we do got to face facts. Again, this is a silent killer that we need to address. We need to address and not be afraid of it. And Lily, Antoine, Adam, we all agree. We know have people in our families that, yes, it is a sensitive topic, but it's something that we all have to grow and face and be adults about. So I'm challenging you as Amber J. I'm challenging you all that's listening to face that fear, to face that fact that, hey, I got some family members, I know some people that may have some mental health. I'm going to try to encourage them to go see somebody. If they don't, okay, still be there for them, but know your boundaries, because a person that has mental health issues or mental health disorder and doesn't know they have a mental health disorder may drain you, and it's unhealthy. So, again, protect you at all times and just be there and be encouraging. And if it gets too much, set those boundaries. All right? I look forward to y'all checking in February. Again, we got some great stuff coming up this year for 2018. I'm Amber J. You heard Lily May, Adam the editor, Antoine the confidential informant, dropping them knowledge, dropping them jewels for y'all to take back, listen to, sip on, dwell on, and apply to your daily life. Again, this is education. That's what we are about, educating the people to be agent of change. Again, this is Amber J. You checked in with Sipping Tea with MBG. And as always, MBG listens and then we speak. Have a great day.